Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, ich wünsche Ihnen einen schönen guten Morgen.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everyone. We can open this morning's sitting. We move now to the Commission and Council declaration on keeping energy bills low and the introduction of a windfall tax in the context of the war in Ukraine. Now, on behalf of the Council, allow me to give the floor to Iván BARTOŠ.
Mr. President, honourable members, Commissioner, Mr. Vice President of the European Commission. We welcome the Parliament's initiative to keep this issue high on the agenda. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and the weaponization of energy supplies have driven energy prices to an unprecedented level and created a very difficult situation for many households and companies. Russia's aim is clear: hit our societies and our economies to create internal dissent and to fracture social cohesion. We will not let this happen. The EU is collectively doing all in its power to address various dimensions of the crisis and in particular to mitigate the effect of rising prices. I will address the main dimensions of this coordinated response. A, the energy supply. First, we are taking all possible measures to avoid energy shortages this winter. In only a few months, we have diversified our supplies, replenished our storage facilities close to their maximum, ensured safety of supply, and taken steps, whenever possible, to encourage the economy to consume less. We see that the price increases weigh more heavily on low-income families whose energy needs account for a higher percentage of their budget. Without government support, many cannot afford that. The explosion of energy prices is also hitting hard SMEs and energy-intensive companies. Many are facing an explosion of their costs, many risk going bankrupt. Some production has been discontinued, some companies have closed down, others have no alternative but to move their production outside Europe. We must stop that. In order to address these challenges, energy ministers at the end of September reached an agreement on allowing to offer regulated electricity prices also to small and medium-sized enterprises, not only households and micro-enterprises. Demand reduction measures, including a voluntary overall reduction target of 10% of gross electricity consumption and a reduction target of 5% of the electricity consumption in peak hours. Capping market revenues obtained by power generators using low-cost technologies other than gas, mandatory temporary solidarity contribution applying to the profits of businesses active in the oil, gas, coal and refinery sectors, which has significantly increased compared to prior years. The second dimension, or the B, if you like, fiscal measures. At the national level, member states are doing their part and have taken over the past few months numerous fiscal measures to alleviate costs for businesses and families. These include lower indirect taxes, social transfers to households, direct interventions on prices paid by consumers, and extraordinary taxes on windfall profits, on which I speak later. We need to make sure that these measures are temporary and well targeted, so that they make a genuine difference for the most affected parts of our society. Our fiscal resources are not unlimited. Let's use them efficiently. The third dimension, social measures. On the social front, the Czech presidency decided to dedicate the informal meeting of employment and social ministers a few days ago, on 13th and 14th October, to discussion on the impact of energy poverty and Ukrainian crisis. In this context, I am pleased to mention that the recent adoption of minimum wage directive, which is a powerful and very concrete signal of the importance of the EU, attaches to ensuring a decent standard of living of all workers. It is only though our combined efforts that we can raise to this challenge, and I look forward to an efficient cooperation with you on all the proposals and initiatives we work together on. And finally, the fourth dimension, windfall profits. Let me turn now to issue that matter of the windfall profits. On the 7th of October, a new regulation on emergency measures to reduce energy prices entered into force. The regulation introduces measures to collect and redistribute the energy sector's surplus revenues to households and small and medium-sized enterprises. More particularly, the new regulation addressed two types of windfall profits. First, it limits revenues of the electricity generators, including intermediaries that use so-called inframarginal technologies to produce electricity, such as renewables, nuclear, and lignite. This is done via the introduction of a cap on the market revenues on inframarginal technologies at 180 euros per megawatt hour. Member States will be able to redirect the surplus revenues generated via the introduction of such cap towards supporting and protecting final electricity consumers. Secondly, the regulation introduces a mandatory temporary solidarity contribution on the profits of businesses active in the crude petroleum, natural gas, coal and refinery sectors. The solidarity contribution will be calculated on taxable profits as determined under national tax rules in the fiscal year standing in 2022 and or in 2023. The solidarity contribution will apply in addition to regular taxes and levies applicable in the member states. This regulation was adopted in less than 2 weeks as an emergency solution to current crisis. What I presented here today was an overview of what we as the EU managed to achieve in only a few months to ensure that families and companies are sheltered from the worst economic consequences of this unjustified war of aggression. We do not know what the future holds or how long the current conflict will last, but we will certainly maintain our resolve to seek collective and articulated responses to ensure a sustainable cost of living for our citizens. Thank you very much for your attention.
Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Bartosz. Now, I welcome Vice President Dombrovskis and Mr. Gentiloni on behalf of the European Commission, and I give the floor to Vice President Dombrovskis to begin.
Honourable Chair, Honourable Minister, Honourable Members of the European Parliament. Russia's illegal aggression against Ukraine is causing a socio-economic upheaval across Europe and beyond. Families and businesses face surge in food and energy prices. There are deep financial and monetary implications too. Lower income households are worse hit as they spend proportionally much more on food and energy. Businesses are also affected by rising energy costs, higher financing costs and lower consumer confidence. The current shock is very different from the COVID-19 pandemic, so our policies must be different too. There are three questions to ask at the moment: how to minimize the costs caused by this war, how to distribute those costs fairly, and how to lay ground for future prosperity. I will address each one in turn. First, we need to work on the root causes of inflation in the energy markets. This requires action to secure alternative sources of supply, to reduce our energy demand, and to address the current situation in electricity and gas markets. The European Union has set up a platform for joint purchase of gas, and we are increasing gas imports from reliable suppliers like Norway and the United States. Member States have agreed energy consumption reduction targets and exceptional measures while we prepare a broader review of the functioning of the electricity markets. The Commission will present this afternoon additional measures to address gas prices and guarantee the security of supply for next winter. And we are also mobilising additional financial resources for Member States to introduce REPower EU chapters in their recovery and resilience plans. Honourable members, the more successful we are regarding energy, the stronger economic and social position we'll be in. Second, we must protect vulnerable households and businesses. It will not be possible to shield everyone from the economic consequences of the war. However, the public sector must protect those most exposed to high energy and food prices. Above all, this means providing income support to those whose purchasing power is most under threat and to worst affected businesses. To achieve that, our support must be targeted, temporary, and retain incentives to reduce energy consumption. The price cap on market revenues for inframarginal producers and the solidarity levy for the fossil fuel sector will allow member states to channel these revenues from very large profits gained through unexpected circumstances towards those who need support the most. To provide generalized fiscal support would be not very helpful. It would fuel inflation, bring even higher energy prices, and potentially further weaken the economy. The European Central Bank is doing its job to contain inflation. The EU and the Member States need to do their job as well. Fiscal policy and monetary policy should not work at cross purposes. This means providing effective support measures that are well targeted and compatible with prudent fiscal policies that do not add to price pressures. Honourable members, we also must look beyond this crisis. So, lastly, we must stay on course with the current policies to build a solid basis for Europe's future prosperity. I am referring in particular to the reforms and investments agreed by the Member States in the recovery and resilience plans. Hundreds of billions of euros in grants will be disbursed to Member States over the next few years as they meet the milestones and targets identified in their plans. And in the next months, we expect them to request the 225 billion euros in loans that remain available. To conclude, honourable members, although this has been a brief overview, I hope I outlined many initiatives and the comprehensive approach that the Commission is applying to the current situation. Thank you, and I look forward to this debate.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Markus Ferber. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vice President, Council Representative, dear colleagues. This is not the first time now since the war began in Ukraine that we discuss the consequences that we draw from all this. We've heard a great deal about what we wish to do, but rather little has been done. So if you analyze the situation, it becomes clear you need to think about increasing the supply, because we do have a problem of shortages of supply. And that's something that we've been discussing for over half a year, but nothing's been done. Well, I know there's a green paper from the European Commission dating back to the year 2000, when we talked about pooling our purchasing within the European Union to have a common approach. And it's taken so many years for us to discuss this. Now the Commission will be looking at its work programme for the following year. If I look at the problems we are currently facing, I simply don't find those reflected in there. There's more bureaucracy, no relief for businesses or citizens, and the priorities that are clearly being set are being set in the wrong way, and it's not proactive, it's reactive, which is a mistake. Thank you.
The
next speaker is the representative of the Socialist and Democrat Group, Ms. García Pérez.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. These times are difficult. We know that the cost of living crisis is coming about because of the war. We're also seeing energy crises. We're seeing inflation internationally that we haven't seen for a great deal of time in Europe. This means that people can't pay their bills, and that's what we're discussing here today. What we're seeing because of this is social inequality, an increase in poverty, particularly amongst those who are most affected by the crisis. Policies from the European Union and national governments should be focusing now on finding solutions to these problems to ensure that people can pay their bills. The European Social Democrats have concrete ideas about this, about what we can do to support businesses and families, how we can reform the workings of the energy markets and strengthen social well-being in a fair manner. First of all, we need a solidarity package for the winter from the European Union. This should include transfers in order to offset the rise in energy prices. We can't wait any longer because we can't let people have to choose between heating or eating. The problems that we're seeing show that we need to have a permanent part of the budget focused on crises, as we saw during the pandemic. Furthermore, we have to ensure that the social security networks are strong and effective. Member states have to immediately implement the minimum wage directive. We know that it took 2 years for member states to transpose this regulation, but at the moment what we need is to see it working because people need it already. We shouldn't let anyone fall out of the electric grid. And then thirdly, we need more funding in order to finance these. It's a question of social justice and fiscal fairness. We can't ask people to pay for this if not everyone is paying for it equally. We need to have an urgent implementation of a windfall tax and minimum taxation for multinationals, not just for companies in the energy sector. Finally, Europe has to urgently put forward an in-depth reform of energy markets to ensure that we have more diversified sources of energy and that we can reduce our dependence on Putin and fossil fuels in general. Recent years have been the most difficult the European Union has seen. War is back at our door. And what we're seeing now is a rise in extremism and nationalism in the European Union. What we need is solidarity in the EU. And so I ask the Commission and the Council to overcome these stumbling blocks and to bring the solutions that our citizens want to see.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Pislaru has the floor on behalf of the Renew Group.
Dear President, Vice President Dombrovskis, Commissioner Gentiloni, dear distinguished members of the Council, dear colleagues, we are indeed living in difficult times. And in difficult times, what we need is 3 important ingredients. We need ambition, we need flexibility, and we need solidarity. Ambition is important these days because regardless of the pain that we are feeling, all of us today, we need to be resolved and keep the important goals that we've set at the European Union level. And that means that the dual transformation, the green and the digital, the way we would like to get the strategic autonomy, we should not cancel our resolves on this. On the second time, we need flexibility. We need to have creative instruments that can reunite the resources that we put together. And then we also need, in times of difficulty, a solidarity that only us at European level can achieve together. And for that, it's important to have a view at the citizens and the entrepreneurs and the self-employed. And Renew Europe is proposing something that you've already seen in the public sphere, a shield that will not necessarily imply that states know everything for our citizens, but that we go close to them and allow them to have the necessary micro-investments to do that. And the Repower EU is exactly the instrument that we've been working together these days in the Parliament. We've seen the Commission, we've seen the general approach of the Council. And this is something that can go down and have the micro-investments at the vulnerable household level, at the SMEs, at micro-enterprises level. This is a way of pushing forward with solidarity. This is the Renew way. This is the European way. Thank you very much.
Danke. Für die Grünen spricht.
Thank you. Now, Ernest Utason has the floor. Good morning. From Strasbourg, let me express my solidarity to all workers in France who are calling for fair pay in the wake of inflation. The war in Ukraine has only made things harder with this inflation being driven up, and it's having an impact on our social fabric, and it's going to show up the errors of the past and of past policies and show us just how important ecological transition is. We just have to look to the United Kingdom to understand the situation. But this is also a time for us now to rescue our economies from a rise of neo-fascism. There are three priorities now. We must reform our electricity market and make it resilient to power cuts. Secondly, we need to tax windfall earnings of companies, not just energy companies. No one must be. We need to protect people against being evictions this winter. And we need to deal with the cushioning the risk of variable interest rates on mortgages and support households as well. We need to create a new fund for ecological transition, as Commissioner Gentiloni and others have suggested and proposed. Now, this is no time for us to drag our feet. The time to act is now. Thank you.
Herr Kollege Antonio Maria Rinaldi, you're the next.
Miss Mario Antonio Rinaldi.
Cari colleghi, di fronte ai problemi. President, Commissioners, colleagues, faced with the problems following the invasion of Ukraine, we direct our disappointment at the Commission because it failed to carry out a preventive assessment of the social and economic impact from the further impetus behind price rises and the cost structure of businesses. I think that the Commission has to contemplate the solution put forward by Keynes in his work How to Pay for the War from 1939. 8 months since the war began, we still don't have solutions shared between member states. European citizens are facing the dilemma of whether to pay utility bills or do their food shopping, while businesses have to decide between paying higher energy costs and raising prices or closing down and firing their own workforce. The public and private financial situation is precarious. Neither have the tools to tackle a systemic crisis from its outset. This cannot legitimise the independent initiatives of individual member states, which create serious asymmetries within the single market. If the Commission allows member states to intervene directly with their own resources without offering their alternatives, there will be illicit competition in the European marketplace, breaching Articles 107 and 108 of the TFEU. The most manifest case is the €200 billion aid plan from Germany, supporting its own system of production. The time-delayed consequences of this policy will undermine public consent in the institutions, disrupting the stability of the European agreements, specifically at the time in which a fast-moving world is finally examining whether they're valid.
Herr Gradus-Dębowski, Czislaw.
The ECR.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender. Dzisiaj potrzeba odważnych i...
We need today courageous market interventions in order to protect consumers from the negative impact of high energy prices. We need, for instance, to limit wholesale prices of gas. We need to freeze ETS prices and introduce mechanisms that would limit increases in those prices. The Commission should also help the weaker member states so that the stronger member states do not intervene while they have a dominating position. But, dear President, ladies and gentlemen, we need something else. We also need to think about our entire energy and climate strategy of the EU. In her first speech in 2019, the President said that the Commission would be a geopolitical one. However, this Commission, in its ambitious ecological and economic projects, forgot about the reality, as if Russia did not exist. Unfortunately, this policy of this Commission failed.
No, you are the one. Madam, excuse me.
Chers collègues, vous aurez sans doute...
Colleagues, you will certainly have noticed that France is on strike today. This is a social movement that is growing just as popular anger is growing across Europe because the price of pasta has gone up by 40%, oil 127%, butter 32%, but wages are not following. People are missing meals, having to scrap their leisure activities, and families have to choose between filling up their cars or turning on the heating. Since I was little, again now I'm hearing television reports about the trade unions holding French people hostage. Yes, it's difficult. People can't get on the train, they can't put their petrol in their car, children can't go to school. But who is responsible for this? Is it the workers who are defending their rights, or is it the small number of ultra-rich people who are doing everything to hang on to their privilege? If you've noticed the strike, it's because it's people who carry out essential work that are stopping their work. Imagine what it would be the case if it was the shareholders who were on strike. Nothing, absolutely nothing would change. So people who are doing useful jobs are undergoing the full force of inflation. The unuseful people who are not useful are seeing their profits increase. The CEO of Total has seen his salary, he's getting 52% more than he was. And so what if they were to be requisitions instead of the workers? I would congratulate the Commission. Finally, you've finally started talking about these super profits. And this is something that we have been talking about and fighting for months. However, you're talking about limiting these taxes to energy and pushing it off till next year. So this is the least you could possibly think of. You need to go further. European people want to see price caps on all of the most essential products. We saw 140,000 people demonstrating against the rising cost of living in Paris this Sunday, and it's clear that what we need is a rise in salaries, not in shareholder profit.
Als letzter Fraktionssprecher ist Herr Goulart-Gilbert.
Thank you. Mr. Koller has the floor.
Monsieur le Président,
President, honourable members. Nothing has been done, and nothing will be done. Sadly, this European Union that we so believed in just delivers nightmares, poverty, and impotence. Getting involved in a war that isn't ours, our people are suffering and paying the price. And the energy crisis has not been tackled as it should have. And the grouped purchasing has been blocked, and now we are faced with the consequences of a war that isn't ours, but everything that is ours, that is yours, that is mine, what is it? It's the suffering of people, the empty pockets, the cold, the distress, and that we will face. And that is the sole responsible for this is the European Union.
Herr Präsident, meine Damen und Herren, es ist schon ein bisschen... President, ladies and gentlemen, it is shattering. We're playing the old tunes. The Commission's saying it'll do everything. It hasn't yet. The Council hasn't done anything yet. We've got Macron, Energie, Olaf, and so on, all being discussed. Macron's a problem, explaining why there are no pipelines from Spain to France. We've been talking about the energy revolution. I think the only solution to the problem is a common Europe. Without a deepened European energy market, none of the proposed solutions will be realistic in any way. Every proposal to raise common taxes or increasing supply won't help. We know that we need energy terminals in one country to have the energy in Germany because we need a deeper energy market. We have to acknowledge that it needs Europe. Europe is the only way to getting solutions. Europe is the solution, not the problem. Thank you.
Dank. Am Wort ist Herr Pedro Marques.
Thank you, and I'll give the floor to Pedro Marques.
Muito obrigado, Presidente.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, Council, dear colleagues. Trying to stop the wave of populism is all about helping families that are suffering. SMEs are not able to bear the brunt of energy prices rising. And we've got people in France saying they can't take any more. They're not coping. And we need a European policy to make sure that no one is left behind. We need to be one market. And if we don't do this, we will hand victory to the populists once more. So we need to do what we learned during the COVID crisis. We solve Europe's problems with more Europe. We did that with the COVID crisis, and we need to do the same with this crisis and future crises. Let's be consistent and fair in the way we do that by sharing energy across Europe and bringing markets together and looking at using the resources that we have and see where the wealth lies, in the super rich's hands. And also, let's not play games with those who are suffering the most. We need to talk to the ECB, and they're talking about further increases in interest rates. They are so disconnected from the ordinary people who are struggling to make ends meet. We need to say to the ECB, they simply can't increase interest rates more. You know, is the EPP really on the side of Europe's families, or are they on the side of the people who invented the idea of austerity? So let's put an end to this.
Nächste Sprecherin ist Madame Marie-Pierre Vedrenier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Messieurs les commissaires.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, Minister. Since the beginning of the conflict, European citizens have shown their solidarity with the Ukrainian people. That's our duty, that's our responsibility, and it's our honor to do so. When Vladimir Putin is using energy and food as an arm, a weapon in his war, our citizens are experiencing the economic fallout in an unprecedented manner that's affecting everyone in every sector. The European Union will be putting in place a windfall tax, about 140 billion, that will allow governments to support those who need it most. But let's not stop at that. We need to limit gas prices. We need to ensure that we can carry out joint purchasing at European level. Commissioner, colleagues, European citizens are looking to us. Now we need to be focusing on moving towards a green, more independent energy sector, one that is more environmentally friendly and shows more solidarity.
Danke. The next one is Madame Mathieu Sarr. Excuse me. I have a blue card. Excuse me, I have one blue card. Do you accept it? Do you accept the blue card? Okay. From whom? From Madame Aubry.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai été assez...
Thank you, President. I was struck by your intervention because finally I was going to say you're using the word windfall taxation of excess profits. I'm happy because now République En Marche and Renew are accepting that there are windfall profits being made by big business and it should be taxed. Now, it's not just energy that is making windfall profits. Would you apply this to all multinationals? I'm thinking LVMH or the big banks which are also making excess profits in the crisis.
Merci, chers collègues, pour votre...
Thank you for that question, colleague. As you know, in the position that we sent to President von der Leyen before her State of the Union speech, our group supported a tax on windfall profits. or as we termed it, a contribution. That's how it works internally within the EU. We believe it's important to focus on those who are profiting from situations as they are being experienced right now. That's our priority. So we want to focus on all of the companies that are profiting due to the war, particularly in the energy sector. Then we'll see how we can develop it as the context develops. Thank you.
Answer. Our next speaker is Madame Sarah Mathieu. Excuse me for the delay.
Lieve collega's, in mijn thuisstad in Gent zie ik elke dag mensen.
Ladies and gentlemen, at home in Ghent, every day I see people who can no longer pay their energy bills or for whom transport has become too expensive. Energy businesses and other sectors are generating record profits at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, that drives people mad. We aren't all in the same boat in this crisis, because this crisis is cynically creating winners. These big winners aren't supplying anything different to in previous years. They're just becoming rich because of a war. That's why we must ensure that excess profits are channeled back to the families so that they can insulate their homes and get solar panels. But that's not enough. I think we must halve these profits where people are getting rich from nothing. We saw the same sort of thing with farmer profits during the COVID crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to ensure that member states get this profit back to the people who need it to eat and to heat their homes.
My dear colleagues, the conflict in Ukraine, which is much to be regretted, is going to have an impact in Europe, and we need to welcome everything that's been said, Marine Le Pen, on a peace conference. And now we hear that the Minsk agreements could have avoided all these tragic events. Jacques Chirac and Sarkozy and others and Luc Ferrec have spoken out on this issue. But Ms. von der Leyen has excluded any kind of pursued this armed course of action and lost her vision for Europe and pursued the globalized pro-US vision of the world order. So it seems that there are some who would prefer a good war to a bad peace, but there is a price to be paid, and the price will be felt by Europeans. Europeans are going to be footing the bill for something that they never caused. 55 billion euros were spent on reconstructions. We expect that Europeans will be suffering the cost of corruption in Ukraine. Do you want an endless war? No, we don't want a new war, and we don't want this in Europe.
Our next speaker is Mr. van Overtveld, Johan.
Voorzitter, commissarissen, collega's.
President, Commissioner, colleagues. We are back in the dangerous triangle that we had been warned about before the summer. There are three sides to this, independent sides: climate, energy, and purchasing power. We have heard a lot about price caps, but it doesn't work. We need solutions that will provide security, and these have to be based on nuclear because it's a sustainable and stable source of energy. There are some member states, such as Belgium, who would like to go further than the Commission plans. But this is, of course, a much higher bar when it comes to energy prices. Energy prices themselves are not a main factor in deciding inflation. What we're seeing is a broader social unrest, and this now seems to be inevitable. In order to bring inflation under control, we need to tighten our belts in monetary and budgetary terms. but we have waited too long in certain areas and recession seems inevitable.
Wow.
Mr. Guzman.
Obrigado, Presidente.
Thank you, President. One of the key economic and social consequences of the war has been the return to austerity thinking. And it's not just the EPP that's supporting this thinking. We're going to see salaries and pensions being cut, the biggest cuts we've seen in recent years, and is going to be the biggest decline in incomes in modern history. And this is something that even the socialist government is supporting. And it was only at the 11th hour that an agreement was reached on taxing windfall profits of energy companies, and still it's going to involve certain tax relief for certain big companies. And this is the same socialist government that is supporting the idea of further interest rate hikes. So it's EPP thinking, the same thinking. And we are seeing problems across the board in Europe with the same policies that were adopted in the past coming back to haunt us now.
Kollegin Begin, Tiziana.
Tiziana Begin. Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. High energy costs in Europe are pushing millions of families under the poverty line, and because mine is a country of SMEs, it's also seriously threatening 3.5 million jobs. Therefore, joint gas purchases are good. We've been calling it for years, and even better is to abandon the Amsterdam market price index, where now the majority of market participants are not energy companies but speculators. And lastly, it's excellent to set a gas price cap. We've been calling for it since the beginning of the crisis, and it can really help citizens if it's properly implemented. But what will really make the difference for businesses and for families is to create a new energy recovery fund, thereby jointly raising capital in the marketplace and transferring it to Europeans in difficulties. The measures aimed at reducing energy bills won't work straight away. We needed them yesterday, and one alone won't work. We need them all, and we need them now. Thank you.
Grazie. Frau Kollegin Pilar.
Thank you, Mrs. Pilar del Castillo Vera.
Comisarios, Presidente del Consejo.
President, Commissioners, we know that there is a reason for the rise in energy price bills. That's why we need decisive action from the Commission and Member States, which will allow temporary measures to ensure they can act immediately. The Council and Commission are talking about whether they should impose a solidarity tax on fossil fuel companies. What's important is that a measure such as this one has to meet its objective, and that this money should go directly to the families and businesses that need it most. Furthermore, we need to be focusing on profit, not bills. They're two very different concepts. We have to establish measures which will allow us and allow industries to ensure that they have tax credits and lower contributions to cover gas prices. We have to help our industry, because the main objective of the European Union and its governments has to be to preserve jobs. Thank you.
Merci. Zu Wort gemeldet hat sich Frau Billy.
Thank you, Mrs. Biljana Bozan.
Zahvaljujem, gospodine predsjedavajući.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our citizens are struggling to pay their bills, whilst greed is often the only reason to raise prices. Consumers receive bills that they don't understand. We need to protect them in their contracts with energy companies. We need to jointly purchase energy. We need to limit gas prices and separate gas prices from electricity prices and put an end to speculation on the energy market. The response to the crisis is solidarity, but this doesn't mean the citizens should again bear the burden themselves. It is time to take from those who do have and give to those who don't. Some people are profiting this crisis. The digital giants, although making huge profits, are letting workers go. Pharmaceutical companies, thanks to vaccines, have become richer than the countries that use taxpayers' money to subsidize the development of these same vaccines. The surplus profits of energy companies this year will be 200 billion euros. This is war profiteering. We socialists do not simply offer ideas in this crisis, but solutions. The windfall tax should be paid by all those who profited greatly from this crisis. The pandemic created 1 billionaire every 30 hours, and almost 1 billion people were pushed into extreme poverty. Only 10 richest people own more than a third of the world population. It is time for everyone to pay their fair share, not just because we need the money, and we do, but because it is most of all fair. Thank you.
Danke. Am Wort ist...
Thank you, Mr. Jordi Cañas.
Gracias, presidente, comisarios.
Thank you, President, Commissioners. It's a great shame that while we're seeing 100, 200, 300-fold increases in energy bills that our citizens are having to pay, but also SMEs and businesses, and we're seeing an equivalent increase in business profits. Is that fair? No. And is it acceptable that citizens are suffering while companies benefit from the same situation? Well, no. It's a time of crisis. And why should it be the same people time and again paying for every crisis? Is that fair? No. So the people who are having windfall earnings need to be taxed. Is that fair that they're earning all this extra cash just because it came their way? No, it's not. It's the SMEs, the citizens that are really paying the price in order to benefit those who are benefiting from the war. And so we need to really change this so that it's not always the same people paying the bill.
Rasmus Andresen.
Thank you. And now Mr. Rasmus Andresen. Thank you. The recession and high energy prices are putting many Europeans into anxiety. More and more people are anxious about the winter. It's therefore good that member states use their resources, for example, to bring in a gas price cap. The problem isn't that member states are acting. The problem is that if at a European level there's no action. With more European solidarity, we'll get through the winter better. And that will mean that a European gas price cap and mandatory energy savings are needed straight away for all member states. We Greens in the House were the first pleading for a windfall tax for energy companies. We are happy that the Commission now is bringing in the taxation of windfall profits, but this needs to be implemented properly nationally. Member states should not go for 33%, but 50% taxation of windfall profits. We need to close the loopholes so that the profits don't go to other countries, allowing a recalculation. We need an agreement with Switzerland so there's no profit shifting. The finance ministers need to get doing this straight away. Thank you. Thank you. And now Mr. Paolo Borchia.
Grazie, Presidente, Commissari.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. The second President of the Italian Republic said that inflation is an odious tax on the poor. And yet, if you look at the impact of rising energy prices on the lowest income groups, you can see the impact it's having. We have to be frank. Even heating has become something that only the rich can afford. There's been a war on gas for years now, and this means that our continent has become increasingly dependent on Russia. We can't wait any further. We need to accept a certain amount of humility and accept that you need to abandon your ideology and move towards different sources of energy.
Nicola, you are the next one.
Mr. Nicola Procaccini. Thank you, President. Thank you, Commissioners. Energy price bills are no longer sustainable for families, and it's the coup de grace for manufacturing industry, which is still left flat out from the COVID crisis. There are many measures the EU could have put in place to contain energy costs. A gas price cap, decoupling of energy prices, a tax on windfall profits, common purchases from third countries, but nothing has been done thus far. I remind you that energy supplies from coal were what led the first countries of Europe to unite 70 years ago. So we, the Conservatives, say that the EU should be less concerned with trifling little things and focus on the few big issues. We aren't wrong. I think we have ever less time available to us, and now we have to give the European Union a reason to be there. Otherwise, it will be too late. President, Mrs. Rego.
Gracias, presidente. A estas alturas.
Thank you, President. Right now, no one has any doubt as to the fact that eating and buying clothes and living costs have gone up. And this is all due to the market, the way it's constructed, and the shortage of fossil fuel supplies. Now, we could keep making big grand statements and writing headlines, but it's inaction that is really playing to the hands of the big utility companies. And in Spain, where the utility companies are making bumper profits worth billions, families and households have seen their household spending going up by 567 euros per year just to buy food. And that really causes unease and unrest that we're seeing reflected in protest movements in France today. And it can be avoided. It would be as simple as changing the system, the way it's constructed and the way the public sector can intervene. And if we were to change our mindset of thinking about energy as a right rather than a market.
Kostas.
Αλήθεια, ποιον κοροϊδεύετε ισχυριζόμενοι ότι για την εκτείναξη του τιμού.
Thank you. You say that the rise in prices and energy costs and so forth, the only reason behind this is the war in Ukraine. But you are well aware who is responsible for this. Is it not all governments and the European Union who are continuing with their green transition? The Amsterdam Stock Exchange and so forth. Although you discuss this during European councils, you all end up with the same idea. And on the other hand, you are laughing at us when you're talking about windfall tax and so forth. What's clear is that today in France and Greece, on the 9th of November, people will be out in the streets to demonstrate because people are without heating or electric.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Inflation is a big threat. When putting together fiscal support for the economy, we should have in mind that if it leads to fiscal expansion, disinflation will be more difficult or more costly. And the highest cost for inflation is always paid by the people. So that's why redirecting of existing money and using new resources like windfall tax is must. The second, energy savings are still in the center. Assure energy savings and quick build up of new, clean, effective resources is the best way how to reduce the risk and reduce the costs. Last but not least, we should not forget about keeping single market functioning. We should rethink if more stringent or at least coordinated state-aid rules are not the best way how to promote efficiency of the single market and avoid disruptions. Last but not least, we shouldn't forget that Putin policy is likely leading toward global recession. If it happens, we shouldn't forget that the highest price is paid by least developed countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mohamed Shaheen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Terwijl ik hier voor u sta, dreigt er voor miljoenen huishoudens een donker scenario deze.
We face a situation where millions of households will be left in darkness. The energy bill isn't alone, there's also shopping prices and transport costs. This is causing social inequality. There's a COVID crisis, and every 30 hours there's a new billionaire. So who's suffering from the crisis? The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. There's so much belief in the free market that few politicians dare to intervene, but there are many people struggling to keep their head above water and who are dependent on the state to survive. What can we do to ensure that energy bills remain affordable? The price cap in combination with a windfall tax is a key, but not the only step. We hope that on Friday, heads of state and government will reach an agreement to bring the energy markets back under control. And then, more calmly, we can look ahead to the next winter. Thank you.
Nächste Rednerin ist Frau Vizepräsidentin Dita Charanzova.
Thank you. Dita Charanzova is the next speaker, Vice President.
Well, it's our duty to back Ukraine against terrorist Putin's regime. But it's also our duty to protect and support our citizens and our companies in this energy crisis. Millions of Europeans don't know how they will make it through this winter. Steep increases in food prices, double-digit inflation. What we need is a crisis management, and we need it now. This House proposed concrete solutions, exempting staple foods from VAT, more money for SMEs and bigger companies, decoupling electricity prices from the prices of gas. And we know how to finance this plan, windfall tax. And this needs to be properly implemented by all member states. Winter is coming, and all our talk must now be backed with concrete actions. Thank you very much.
Danke vielmals. Ich bitte nun zum Rednerpult Frau Viola von.
Thank you, Mrs. Viola von Kramon-Taubadel.
Kolleginnen und Kollegen,
President, dear colleagues, while Putin is suffering military losses, he's hoping with the change of the seasons for a victory. He's really gambling on temperatures falling and solidarity falling along with temperatures. Obviously, we can't influence the weather, but we can have an impact on our unity and us holding together. Businesses are struggling. They're having to lay off some of the people because of the increasing costs. And in the wake of this crisis, we need an exceptional tax to help cushion the impact so that we can support the most vulnerable in our societies. But basically, we need to become less independent in terms of our energy supplies, independent of autocrats. And if we are independent, we can really protect ourselves more effectively. So when we talk about social cohesion and solidarity, that's important. I am confident that this is a test that we will pass as Europeans.
Zum Rednerpult.
Voorzitter, collega's, deze energiecrisis overkomt ons.
Colleagues, this energy crisis is not one that we can overcome easily. It's the result of a conscious political choice, and it's one that could have been predicted. Environmental dogmatism is also leading us to abandon nuclear. Our sanctions have led to war. we're trying to impoverish Russia and bring down prices, and the opposite is happening. Prices are exploding, and Putin's going to get even more money to finance his dreadful war. We're seeing, and the result of all of this is massive inflation. Purchasing power is down. Economies are also falling. We are committing suicide. Citizens are paying a huge price. Average families are paying 4 times more for their energy bills right now. They're forgotten. They're left by the side of the road. And what's the European Union doing? More sanctions, more weapons. The European Union was created to ensure well-being and prosperity. And yet it's war and poverty that we're seeing now. The European Union doesn't know what to do. We don't even know if we'll be able to solve this. We are already experiencing difficulties, and this folly has to end.
Alexandra, das Wort.
Ladies and gentlemen, I told this over and over again. We can't fight 2 wars at once against Putin and carbon. It's above our weight. Yes, we must contain Putin for any price. Yes, we must support Ukraine. Yes, we must be independent of Russia's supplies. Yes, we are capping the prices and introducing the windfall tax. But it's not enough to keep social stability and prices under control. Both liberal democracies at home and friendly cooperation inside the EU are in danger. Therefore, we should slow down our radical decarbonisation effort by mitigating the ETS system, by allowing the LNG long-term contracts, by capping the energy prices, the gas from the electricity, and finally also by rehabilitating fully the nuclear energy as the stable source of baseload. This is the way to cheaper energy.
Danke. Am Wort ist nun Herr András György.
Mr. András György.
Köszönöm a szót, elnök úr, tisztelt.
Thank you, President. Honorable colleagues, Europe has got into a crisis. Energy prices are going up, SMEs are fighting for survival, industries are going bankrupt. The reason is obvious, the war and the wrong sanction policy, the wrong reply to the war. That is why we cannot pay the bills today. The solution is to rethink these sanctions, because energy supplies is a matter of physical things and not of ideology. We cannot risk the energy supplies of Europe. We cannot risk jobs in Europe. We have to pursue policies that is supported by the people. For instance, the Hungarian national consultation about sanctions is such a policy, because the ever-deepening crisis can only be tackled with the support of the society. That is why it is unacceptable that in this situation Brussels retains 600 billion euros as a resource. Every member state should be given the resources due so that it can be channeled to the citizens as soon as possible. Thank you.
Herr Kollege Sean Kelly, the floor is yours.
Putin's armed forces have underwhelmed, but he retains a strong grip on energy supply for now. He will try to weaponise the winter to weaken resolve and support for Ukraine. The EU and Member States must introduce a range of measures and supports to help households and businesses and protect citizens from the worsening energy price hikes. Immediate actions of the energy crisis should not be at the detriment of the future needs of our energy system. Yet, the market should be for the benefit of society, not siphon the life from it. It is only right to apply a windfall charge to actually give that money back to citizens. To reduce energy bills for consumers in the longer term, the answer is clear. Embrace the energy efficiency principle and get renovating the built environment. But for now, the windfall profits being made by producers and above all by traders of the energy system must be subjected to storm force taxes. This astronomical and immoral profits must be taxed as soon as possible.
Danke, Frau Kollegin Gabriele Bischof. The floor is yours.
Danke, Herr Vorsitzender. Viele haben es.
Thank you, President. Many have said that this energy crisis is threatening millions of Europeans, jeopardizing their livelihoods, and ordinary employees cannot afford these price rises. It will affect the poorest. 30% of people in Europe can't build up any savings. So wages up, prices down, and solidarity with those who have to strike in Europe. We've already talked about financing this with windfall profit taxes, but what's really worrying me, the great concern, is the explosion in energy prices, threatening millions of jobs in energy-intensive industries. And if we act quicker here and don't just leave it run, then the backbone of Europe won't break. But if that does happen, then we'll see impoverished regions and more dependency, less autonomy. Europe must act more quickly and cannot just assume that the problem will resolve itself. If you want a decent prospect for the future, you must boldly act now.
Präsidentin Nicole Baer, Sie haben das Wort gebeten.
Herr Präsident, sehr geehrte Kolleginnen.
President, honourable members. Energy and food are the basis of our existence, and it's a very fragile ground that we're standing on. People are worried about food prices and general cost of living and the spiralling inflation. This is a situation that Putin is causing in order to undermine solidarity, and that's not something we can allow to continue. We must not just talk about it, but act, take concerted action and fight inflation. We are dealing, for example, with the situation looking at nuclear power in Germany. We're trying to purchase power from reliable partners, improve our infrastructure and build our capacity to generate power, and make structural changes and provide relief for citizens and businesses. And so that we've got the gas and electricity price break, but it's not something that you can just do overnight. But we are making progress, and we are staying confident, staying together and united. And this is something that's going to stand us in good stead against aggression from Putin and show our solidarity with Ukraine as well.
Merci, Président. Monsieur le
President, Commissioner, colleagues, I welcome the opportunity that we have to call once again for a tax on windfall profits. However, the situation is anything but one that we should welcome. Citizens are facing extreme price hikes in vital services such as energy and food, and yet we see CEOs and shareholders in the same sectors, energy and food, making huge profits. 50% increase in Total's profits in 2022. 50% increase on the CEO of Total's salary increase in 2022. And yet we're not seeing similar taxes. If you look at our European citizens and ask yourselves, can we let this injustice continue? It's fair that the excess bonuses made available to shareholders should be used to help the most vulnerable. This is a social choice for our society. We have to avoid concentration of wealth, which also leads to impoverishment of the majority.
Am Wort ist Herr Gunnar Beck.
Thank you. Mr. Gunnar Beck has the floor.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender.
Thank you, President. Oil prices have doubled since 2021. It's a threefold increase for coal, and for gas it's been a fivefold increase. And following the statistics of the IMF, we're going to see increases all the way up to 2026. Why? Because the cost of CO2 certificates has doubled, and generally the climate policies are responsible as well. It's the energy companies and the EU itself that's benefiting from all this. And now some of the windfall taxes, windfall profits are going to be taxed, and that's great. But who's going to pay for it? And it's not consumers that will benefit. It's going to be the EU itself in order to set yet more demanding CO2 and climate objectives. We've got an 8% target. And no region in the world, not even the United States, is actually at that level of ambitious. Well, what I can say, you're not trying to save the world. You're trying to spread poverty and grief for all Europeans. Thank you.
Gracias, presidente. Mientras el responsable.
Thank you, President. China is responsible for 27% of global emissions, and yet you're talking about how to ask Europeans to pay for the sacrifices that are needed for your globalist agenda. There are third powers. You're talking about creating renewables, but this is what has led to the huge prices for these companies. We're seeing Spanish people subject to higher VAT and the disappearance of the middle class. And these, if you want to really bring down climate bills, we have to allow families to be free to choose their energy. We have to have a plan for companies avoiding new taxes or new sanctions on them. We can't be hypocritical. We shouldn't be sanctioning European companies. We have to increase energy production using all types of sources of energy that we know. Put an end to speculation on CO2 emissions. And finally, we have to ensure that members can pay for their bills and pay for their houses. And if we can't do that, then let's just forget about it.
Unser nächster Sprecher ist Herr.
The next speaker is Ms. Valivorcincic.
Citizens have been attacked by three sides: inflation, rising energy prices, and finally the destruction of economy. In France, trade unions have called for a general strike from today. Last week we were in Brussels, and there are also protests around the Parliament's building. Citizens, farmers, all those who are facing increasing costs. Winter has only arrived. In Croatia, even before this crisis, household incomes were mostly directed at paying electricity bills and other bills. Prices have remained the same, and the Croatian energy company is amassing great losses and is in danger of bankruptcy. These costs can be covered by funds and budgets. However, due to recession, due to a weakened economy, this dam will not sustain the flow of water for a long time. Cheap energy is the solution if we don't want our economies to collapse. When Croatia was in war, nobody helped us during the crisis. This type of policies needs to be ended.
Danke. Unser nächster Redner ist am Weg, daher darf ich sofort.
Thank you. Our next speaker is on his way, so I give the floor to Agnes Jongerius for now.
Dank u, voorzitter. Het werkwoord is leven en.
Thank you, President. The verb is to live, not to survive. But survival is a reality for ever more people. Ever more people don't know at the beginning of the month how they will make ends meet, pay the rent, buy their shopping at the end of the month. Today's crisis shows the vulnerability of our essential services. Energy prices are exposed to the power of the market, and the European plans for an energy cap help. They ward off the hardest blows, but these are just symptoms, and we have to cure the underlying disease. In the European Social Rights Charter, it says that we all have the right of access to essential services like energy, water and transport, and that's what Europe has to guarantee. That is a solid foundation that people can build their lives on. Thank you.
Kollegin, ich erteile das Wort Herrn Lokkegaard, Norden.
I now give the floor to Mr. Morten Lokkegaard.
Politik består ofte af
Politics is often a matter of unpleasant choices. This is certainly one of them. Europeans are under pressure, winter is waiting, and Europe will be hit hard. Should we politicians intervene in a well-functioning market in the attempt for emergency solutions? On the face of it, you would say no, but we cannot do that. This is an extraordinary crisis. It calls for extraordinary measures. The essential point now is that the solution we produce actually ensures that the energy market continues to function, so the prices can regulate themselves also in the future, and so that investors want to invest in green energy going forward. Right now, we have to get through the winter, and that calls for extraordinary solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Herr Kaff, you are the next one.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In an age of private yachts and super jets, as the super rich get richer, it is time for windfall taxes. 5 months ago this week, on 19th of May, this House adopted a resolution calling for a windfall tax on energy companies. But 2 weeks ago, we rejected a call for a tax on the excessive profits of corporations benefiting from the crisis. While we've been debating this tax for 5 months, households across Europe have seen their energy costs soar, small businesses shut down, and millions are falling below the energy poverty line. We have solutions. Introduce a windfall tax, differentiate between fossil fuels and renewables, and share the revenues with households. We also need to ban evictions and disconnections, and we need to increase the minimum wage to a living wage. The crisis is here right now. Households and small businesses are experiencing it, and it's not far off in the future. So now is the time for action. Thank you.
Danke. Am Wort ist Herr Michel.
Thank you. Mr. Rogeven is next.
Als de muziek stopt, wordt het qua liquiditeit ingewikkeld.
When the music stops, we're going to have problems. As long as the music plays, we have to continue to dance. It was the CEO of Citigroup who said that just before the financial crisis. And now, once again, we're on the dance floor. People are in their homes. Citizens are waiting to see what music is going to play and if it's going to continue to play for a week, a month, a year. But if you look at what the Commission's saying, I just keep hearing the same thing. Be careful with how much you spend, sharing the debt, more regulation, more authoritarian regulation in member states, more European Union. Colleagues, we have to be clear. All of this, it's not a solution. This is all what caused these problems. We are at the dawn of an unprecedented recession, and the time has come to act. We have to get over our addiction to subsidies. Music has stopped, the party's over.
You are the next one.
Muito obrigada, senhor.
Thank you, President. We've seen historic levels of inflation, and they're really breaking all the statistics, and we're seeing families that are penniless trying to make ends meet for their basic needs. Food prices, energy prices, transport costs are all driving families to desperation. Now, they are exploiting all the full resources of their salaries in order to pay for these basic things. People are suffering from energy poverty. We don't need grand statements. We need specific measures now. We need taxation on windfall earnings to be decided at a European level. They need to be targeted to support families, small businesses, and to keep the economy afloat. Just a final word for the national governments, and specifically the Portuguese government. You cannot limit yourself to window dressing. You need to take political responsibility when it comes to these issues. Thank you.
Jonas Fernandez, the floor is yours.
Buenos días, Presidente.
Good morning, President, Commissioner, Council. Prices are high. Electricity and energy bills are also very high. And the European Central Bank continues to do what it always has. It's important for the political authorities, the Commission, Council and Parliament to reach an agreement that we can't leave inflation entirely in the hands of the European Central Bank, because this would not be the best thing. So if it's not up to the ECB, what can we do? I think that when it comes to energy in particular, there's a lot that we can do. I welcome the announcements made by the Commission, but the capacity for the EU to consolidate the energy market, there's a lot that we can do there. And of course, we need proper financing for households and families to help pay their bills. The solidarity that the Commission has proposed is good. It can help to fund a European instrument that will reduce prices. Thank you.
Herr Guy Verhofstadt, Sie sind nun am Wort.
Mr. Commissioner, so it's 8 months now that this energy crisis started. 8 months. And I have still not seen a coherent plan by the European Commission. I find it hugely disappointing. Because it's your job to come not with a fragment approach, but with a global structural approach. And there is no one. You're talking about price caps, okay? You're talking about windfall tax, but what is the whole picture? What will you do to tackle this energy crisis? I think you have to do 3 things. That is an energy purchase platform that's completely different what you're doing now. You will buy together 15% in 2023. It's the opposite what you have to do. You buy together 85%. Where is the security fund for the investments that we absolutely need? And where is the energy assistance plan for our households and companies? The same as we did with COVID. Why we don't repeat it now? You are right when you criticized in this op-ed the German approach with the 200 billion. But it's not only necessary to criticize it, you have to also to come forward with an alternative. And we're going to do that with a number of MEPs in a few moments. We're going to send you a letter about it with these proposals cross-party. Thank you.
Unsere nächste Rednerin ist Frau Angelika Niebler.
Angelika Niebler is our next speaker.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you, President. Vice President of the Commission, Council representatives, dear colleagues. We are now, winter is approaching and many families are asking how they will be able to pay for their utility bills, how they will be able to cope with the cost of living. And people have already said that valuable time was lost, but finally we have proposals from the Commission on the table now. It's late, but it's better late than never. We've got the solidarity levy, a break on gas prices, common purchasing of gas, and we've got a number of proposals on the table. So I'd like to use my speaking time to call upon the member states now to roll up their sleeves, and I'd call upon the Council presidency specifically to really wrap all the member states on their knuckles and ensure that they do their homework. We are far from having a common energy market in Europe, but if we really want to get this crisis under control, we must act together, which means that we must tap into all the resources that we have across our lands. Thank you.
Ist nun Frau Irene Tinagli.
I now give the floor to Irene Tinagli.
President, dear colleagues, dear Commissioner, for months we've been saying to people that the rising cost of energy was something limited and temporary, but it's not been like that. And let's face it, it will not be like this in the future. Governments had to intervene massively to support families and businesses, and we'll have to do that again in the future, but it's not going to be sustainable in the long term. We know that. So what does it mean? It means that this will affect the competitiveness of our businesses, will affect the single market and bring about fragmentations. And will also have spillovers that will aggravate and accelerate a possible recession all over the European Union. So we need to intervene very quickly, urgently on two fronts. One, provide a genuine European instrument to provide support to those countries that don't have the fiscal space and also to restore the single market, and then we need an incisive intervention on the energy market. Yes, the joint procurement, but we need something more ambitious on the gas price, on the coupling gas from energy prices. If we are not ambitious now, we will regret when it will be too late. Thank you.
Grazie. Herr Radan Kanev, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear Commissioner, Minister, colleagues. Let me be, as usual, very straightforward. I am deeply concerned by the ease and speed with which the Council, including my own government, approved the so-called windfall tax. I am concerned because windfall tax does not necessarily reduce bills, which is the theme of our debate, but rather subsidizes the most unsustainable of all forms of electric generation, this from natural gas, distorts natural market incentives, and eventually jeopardizes the business plans and investments of more sustainable and viable alternatives. And I am extremely concerned by the populist zeal with which this House discusses extension of so-called windfall tax on other businesses. It is market-based innovation and competition that could lead us out of this crisis and not breaking the free market. Thank you.
Danke. Das Wort gebeten hat Herr Nica.
Thank you. Mr. Dan Nica has the floor now.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. Every winter we have tens of millions of Europeans who don't know how they're going to pay the bills in winter and don't know whether they're going to have the money to buy food or medicines, and now inflation has driven us into an impossible situation for them, where flour, sugar and other staples have become unaffordable. And there's a lack of action from the Commission, which hasn't acted for many days. We've seen inflation as a result. In energy prices, we've seen 80% inflation, and now you've got the issue of costs. At the same time, companies are making excess profit, and the excess profits are leading to inflation. All the energy companies are making windfall profits for years. They've been left to do that, and we're all paying the price now. So let's responsibly tax windfall profits, and then we'll be able to get through this winter. Thank you.
Das Wort gebeten hat Frau Benchum.
Thank you. Ms. Benjumea Isabel has the floor.
Gracias, presidente, señor comisario.
Thank you, President. Commission. Faced with the dreadful energy inflation crisis, problems with paying mortgages due to interest rates, we already have a tool to try to tackle this. These are the next generation funds that the Commissioner is very familiar with. We're talking about 800 billion euros. And a large amount of this is still waiting to be invested. And I'd like to take this opportunity to urge the Commission to do everything it can to ensure that this 800 billion euros is implemented in an effective and rapid manner so that they can work for the real economy, for families and businesses. And also, you ensure that member states carry out the reforms that are necessary to accompany these funds. to ensure that we can make our economy more competitive and that this liquidity that is so necessary can go into the economy. So use the Next Generation Funds, Commissioner, and call upon the Commission to do its work to ensure that this money is spent quickly.
Danke, Frau Kollegin. Nun hat sich zu Wort.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kompoulos has the floor.
Micro.
Ευχαριστώ κύριε Πρόεδρε, αξιότιμε κύριε Επίτροπε, αγαπητοί και αγαπητές.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, honourable members. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has been going on for more than 8 months now, and it's having an impact on the sovereignty of that state, and with a knock-on effect for Europe and the rest of the world of a great magnitude. We're trying to take measures now to guarantee security for everyone. But there are clearly disruptions to the supply chain within the internal market. The energy crisis will once again hit citizens across Europe, and many businesses at the same time, however, are making bumper profits as on the back of this situation. So in Greece, we're talking about taxing surplus profits
that we are discussing today. So we will assess the evolution of this crisis. I will present in November the 11th our economic forecast, but for sure, economy is slowing down, and this multiple crisis has to be addressed. As you know, the Commission will adopt later today a new package on energy. I have to say it is a huge package. Gradually, we are finding common ways among member states. Of course, it will not be the last. I have 3 key words for the coming weeks and months on my side and the Commission side. First key word is coordination, because of course all the national measures are facing the social consequences of this crisis. We know that the European family is spending 20% of the income for food and 15% of the income on energy, so 35%. But this is an average. Of course, we have several countries and several low-income households where food and energy are near to 50% of the family expenditure. And the increase that we are looking is putting these families, these households, in a very dangerous situation, and the same is happening for especially small and medium companies. So we need to react, to support, but to avoid that this support is undermining the monetary policy effort, because the reduction of inflation is in the common interest, and it is especially in the common interest of most more vulnerable households. So it's an interplay, not easy, because we need, of course, a monetary policy. We don't need exactly the same monetary policy in all areas of the world, because Europe has particular roots of its own inflation and needs particular reaction, but this is for the ECB to decide, and our fiscal coordination should complete the monetary policy and not compete with it. My second key word is solidarity. From the social point of view, many things were raised in this discussion, and I think that our solidarity contribution on windfall profits is a first step. It is connected to energy for the legal reasons that you know very well, but this doesn't mean that member states could not go further to address these issues. Solidarity means also look to the risks of fragmentation. And we have the same concern that we had during the pandemic. Because, of course, we have different fiscal space in different countries, and we should discuss the possibility to look to further possible common financial tools based on loans to address these risks of fragmentation. And finally, competitiveness, because the risk that there is in these asymmetric consequences of this crisis is for Europe to lose competitiveness. And so our two main commitments, first on the clean energy transition, and second on implementing reforms and investment of next generation EU, are not only important because we have to implement what we decide, but they are important if we want to avoid a difficult situation for the Union in terms of global competitiveness. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne, pán komisár. A na záver rozpravy vystúpi.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now to conclude, on behalf of the Council, the Deputy Prime Minister, Iván Bartoš, has the floor.
Members, Mr. Commissioner, thank you very much for this very timely debate on such a crucial topic. The cohesion of our societies is at stake. At the end of the day, there will be a price to pay for all of us as a result to Russia's actions. Let us make sure that the burden is fairly distributed. I completely agree with Ms. Garcia Perez, who echoed the recent resolution of this House that citizens should not be obliged to choose between heating and eating. And I also take good note of what many of you have said, that everyone should contribute in a situation of crisis, especially those with higher profits. Let me underline once again, Member States and EU are doing their utmost to cushion the blow on our companies and citizens. We are closely following the evolution of the situation and will adapt our policies according to the needs. This is not an easy task, and it requires swift action across several policies and continuous articulation between Member States and EU institutions. In times like this, we should not forget that the coordination between Member States is absolutely key to ensure the integrity of a single market and maintain a level playing field between our economies, as Mr. Niedermayer said. Finally, we look forward to receiving a new proposal which the Commission is going to present this afternoon. Let me assure you that the Council will discuss them swiftly so they can have a positive impact already this winter. Thank you very much once again for your attention and this debate.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Rozprava.
Thank you very much. That concludes this debate. The next point on today's agenda is a Council and Commission statement on mental health. I'll start by giving the floor to Deputy Prime Minister Iván Bartoš on behalf of the Council.
Mr. President, honourable members, Mr. Commissioner, thank you for scheduling this timely debate. Mental health is a topic of utmost importance. As the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, noted in the introduction of the World Mental Health Report of June this year, mental health is a lot more than the absence of illness. It is an intrinsic part of our individual and collective health and well-being. Ultimately, there is no health without the mental health. The topic of last week's World Mental Health Day, make mental health and well-being a global priority for all, is also testimony to its importance. I very much 24th of October 2022. To conclude, let me assure you that the presidency of the Council, we will continue to follow attentively the relevant developments and challenges in the field of mental health. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia vystúpi v rozprave.
Thank you very much. And now give the floor on behalf of the European Commission to the Commissioner, Madam Stella Kyriakides.
President, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen. Mental health is precious for each and every one of us. And I want to thank the European Parliament for shining a light on Europe's mental health. Even before the pandemic, mental health problems affected 85 million people in the EU, and COVID only exacerbated the problem. Now, with economic worries, soaring energy prices, rising food costs, and daily images of a brutal war, this is all putting incredible pressure on people. Many citizens and families are forced to choose between heating their homes and filling their fridges. We live in turbulent times, filled with uncertainty, and it is so easy to feel lost, to feel hopeless, to feel alone. Experts, not surprisingly, have warned of an approaching tsunami of mental health challenges. This warning was confirmed during the Conference for the Future of Europe, especially echoed by our young people. I welcome that this House adopted a resolution already last July calling for action at European and at national levels. We need to take urgent, ambitious and coordinated steps to protect the mental health of our citizens, especially for the most vulnerable amongst us, for children, for the elderly, for young people, for those who are suffering in silence, who do not have a voice. I assure you that we are listening and we are playing our part. In the State of the Union address, President von der Leyen committed to work on a comprehensive approach to mental health. We have started already to prepare this work, which will involve several EU policies and actions. First of all, we need to improve our understanding of mental health issues and prioritise prevention and promotion of better mental health. We have to improve access to mental health care, one of the principles of the European Pillar of Social Rights. We are supporting Member States in reforming mental health systems and implementing national programmes, including on suicide prevention. We have already allocated more than €28 million to mental health actions under EU4Health programmes in the last 3 years. Some Member States have also used the Resilience and Recovery Facility to focus on mental health. The key to success in ensuring that mental health is addressed in a comprehensive way, at home, at school, at work, and in the healthcare system. Identifying children facing challenges, supporting parents and families are important to prevent mental health issues. And I can say that because I have worked in the mental health area as a psychologist for many years of my life. We must build inclusive and equal societies that reject stigma and truly listen to citizens. Societies that hear cries for help, no matter how quiet these cries sometimes are, and respond with accessible care. Together, I am convinced we can achieve more. We need commitment from all actors throughout our societies. In research, in employment, in media. We need to show how business, sport and education can constructively contribute. We need to work with all Member States, with NGOs, with healthcare professionals and Parliament. But most importantly, we need to respond to the needs of our citizens and those of our health professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, protecting mental health is an investment. It's an investment in our people, it's an investment in our economies, it's an investment in the future. And let us not forget, there can be no health without mental health. So I truly look forward to working closely with you to prepare this comprehensive approach, to listening to you, and to work together in order to promote healthy minds and build healthy societies. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. A teraz v rozprave vystúpi za...
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the EPP, I give the floor to Maria Wong.
Council representatives, I welcome this much-needed debate and our Parliament's support of it. Commissioner, you've been dedicated to our citizens' mental health long before your mandate as our Health Commissioner began, and I want to thank you for your continued support. At this very podium last month, in her State of the Union, President Ursula von der Leyen proposed a dedicated initiative to mental health. Finally, a Commission President who is listening to the thousands of Europeans who demand and expect their mental health to be supported by our EU. In the past 10 to 15 years, our citizens have faced the Great Recession in 2008, Brexit, nearly 3 years of pandemic, and now facing great uncertainty with inflation, cost of living, an energy crisis, a climate crisis, and a war, multiple wars. We desperately need to understand that mental health is about being proactive and preventative in our care and should never solely focus on existing in a stressful cycle of reactive support. We need the initiative introduced by the President to promote well-being. We need the initiative to protect the rights of people who lived experience of mental health and tackle the stigma and discrimination they face on a daily basis. We need each of our 27 EU ministers responsible for mental health working collectively with experts and organisations, but not just in silo. Creating an EU mental health strategy is now needed more than ever, and we need that strategy to be implemented in weeks, not years. These are the actions we need to tackle to improve the daily lives of millions of our EU citizens. Thank you very much.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Teraz v rozprave vystúpi za skupinu...
Thank you very much. I'll now give the floor to Madam Dura Ferrandis for the S&D. President, Commissioner, Council. Although economic crises, including conflict, are a risk for humanity, they're always an opportunity for public policy and our European institutions. Now is the time to take care of our health and the mental health of European citizens. The final report of the Conference on the Future of Europe included the need for a European mental health strategy over the long term. My group, the S&D group, has been asking for this for a long time. We need a strategy whereby mental health will be covered in all policy areas, employment, environment, education, and we need to have universal access to quality mental health services. A European strategy should not just include recommendations for member states, but also has to legislate where it's possible to do so. For example, on health and safety at work, we need a directive on the psychosocial risks at work. The recognition of certain psychosocial problems relating to certain jobs, and also the application of artificial intelligence in the workplace. We can and must do a great deal more.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia vystúpi za skupinu.
Thank you. The next speaker on behalf of Renew is Maria Soraya Rodriguez Ramos.
Thank you, President. On behalf of Renew Europe, we welcome this very important debate. The health crisis and the pandemic really shone a light on the mental health problem, but the fact is that things got worse between 2020 and 2021. Adolescents found their problems doubling, and children aged between 10 and 19 found that they were suffering from mental health problems, and suicide became the second largest cause of death for young people in Europe. This isn't something that you can just ignore when you're faced with this hard reality. And so we are talking about mental health from an early age and trying to go to the places where young people are, to go to schools, and we need to do more to fight stigma that still exists in our societies. We need to reinforce mental health services and ensure that they are considered essential services. And in our group, Renew Europe, we are calling for a European mental health strategy. We've been calling for this for some time now, trying to ensure that there is adequate funding for prevention and treatment of mental health problems in Europe.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne.
Thank you very much. I'll now give the floor to the Green Party, Kim van Sparentak.
Thank you. Young LGBTIQ plus people are often struggling with their mental health. Numbers show that they are 4 times more likely to be bullied in schools and are 5 times more likely to commit suicide because they do not feel accepted and have to deal with hate speech and violence. And what definitely doesn't help is that we increasingly see hate and disinformation being spread about our community on social media. And this hate is fueled by far-right groups and amplified by social media's algorithms. And worse, these lies about our community are then repeated in the political arena, also in this house, legitimizing hate. And online violence leads to offline violence. We see that with the increase in bomb threats against gender clinics and with the devastating recent shooting outside a queer bar in Bratislava, where 2 people lost their lives. We have to do better for our LGBTIQ plus community. We need to do everything that we can to stop the amplification of hate and disinformation online by banning these polarizing algorithms. But we also have to collectively stand up against this hate being legitimized offline, especially in the political arena. Let me be clear. If we tolerate hate against minorities, we tolerate the erosion of our values and our democracies. And we accept young generations to grow up feeling unwanted and unloved. We have to do better. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalší vystúpi za...
Thank you. And now I give the floor for... That was...
I am a psychiatrist, former Minister of Health and director of a psychiatric clinic. For a long time I've been dealing with the organization of care for people with mental disorders. Fortunately, I have to state that in this area, the European Union continues to walk on a totally wrong way. The so-called reforms, which started in the USA and the United Kingdom 6 years ago, resulted in moving mentally ill people from underfinanced psychiatric institutions to the street, among homeless people, into shelters and also into prisons, a special form of social service. European states have not drawn lessons from this. They continue in this perverse practice, they even deepen it further, based on an absurd ideology. The aim is no longer treating people successfully. As far as social causes of mental disorders, they aggravate in the United Union all the time. It's material, spiritual poverty, worsening possibility of social and working life, growing social isolation, that people succumb to stress too easily. We should deal with causes and consequences in a competent manner, not based on ideology. Thank you very much.
V rozprave vystúpi za skupinu ECR pani.
Thank you. And now for the ECR group, Mrs. Kopczynska. You have the floor.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, dear colleagues. It is a very important debate. The number of people suffering from mental disorders has been rising steadily, and according to the recent estimates, 1 person in 3 suffering from mental health disorders has no access to professional medical care. This has been further deteriorated by the pandemic. For that reason, an adequate reform of the mental health protection system must be targeted at developing a community model of psychiatric care and guaranteeing equal access through the implementation of programs in health centers and through adequate models for the system of mental health care for adults, children and youth. If we really want to contribute to the improvement of the mental health of our citizens, here at the European Parliament, let us not forget about the cooperation with member states and international organizations, about the exchange of information, best practices, and contacts with specialized medical personnel. Let us shape actively pilot projects, therapeutical projects, for people with trauma, addicted to modern digital technologies, programs to support fighting depression and anxiety. Let us also help people with psychosocial problems. Let us help them shape their own autonomy and independence in society. Let us listen to the needs of our citizens so that medical health centers are located close to their place of residence, offering the support by psychologists, psychotherapists, and community therapists. Although we will need to wait for the results, we already need to think today about the reorganization of psychiatric healthcare by training qualified therapeutic teams. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia vystúpi za skupinu Left, pani Kateřina Konečná, prosím.
Thank you. And now, on behalf of the Left, Mrs. Kuchik.
Colleagues, Commissioner, as for the newly announced initiative on mental health, I'd like to see a more complex plan that would protect the rights of people with mental health issues, raises awareness and ends the stigma in this area. In order to be possible, the EU must go the way of having a long-term strategy, including a mental health plan, similarly to that in the area of cancer. The pandemic has shown that mental health is very much a neglected and underfinanced issue. The accessibility of care is worse and worse, especially for young people. Mental health can have its causes in the social, economic, physical or cultural environment that we live in. It's not only a health issue per se. We need to realize that economic issues can have a negative impact on mental health of the population, and it will only exacerbate. My question for the Commission is, how will the individual DGs in the Commission coordinate their activities to improve, and where can we expect a specific health plan?
Ďalšia vystúpi v rozprave pani podpredsednička Eva Kovač.
And now, Eva Kovač, Vice President, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, President. 9 million people in Europe live with mental problems. Suicide is the second most common cause of death among the young people. Lots of people commit suicide every year. There is another helpless group in Europe. These are our senior citizens, the elderly. They live in suffering, in poverty. They leave suicide notes by their bedside where they say they have paid all the bills, they leave their account numbers, they beg for forgiveness, they commit suicide, they leave in silence. They had been waiting for our help, the help that did not reach them in time. So, what are we to do in the face of these atrocious facts? If we don't do much beyond this debate, it will be terrible indeed. So, Commissioner, I am counting on you. I know that you professionally and you as a human being, as a sensitive person, you will do your utmost to help these two groups. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia vystúpi pani Radka Maxová. Prosím, máte slovo.
Thank you. Mrs. Radko-Maxova.
Thank you for the floor, Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Commissioner, Madam Commissioner. Mental health is of essential importance for personal well-being and also for the well-being of the society. It touches all areas of our life, be it employment, public health. It has impacts on the sustainability of society and economy. Problems with mental health in Europe and the United Kingdom involve 80 million people. 600 billion euros are the costs. We also can see the negative impacts of coronavirus pandemic, energy crisis, and the war in Ukraine in the area of mental health. Nevertheless, mental health does not get the attention it deserves at the European level. Therefore, we call for a comprehensive strategy of the European Union in the area of mental health, which would include different policies. We also need to declare the year 2024 the European Year of Mental Health. I'm very glad that I was able to initiate a positional document of the ST group where we call for this strategy to be developed. And I hope that the Commission will take into account our position when preparing its initiative in the area of mental health, because this is the initiative which was declared by the President of the European Commission in the State of Union address 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, President, Council, Commission. Mental health has been forgotten in public health policy across Europe. And we see this in the lack of comprehension and the stigma attached to people who are suffering from this, particularly in terms of isolation. Crises show the truth of certain situations, and what we're seeing in this crisis is the profound impact of mental health on our citizens and how much they are suffering. And it's high time that mental health should no longer be forgotten. And to achieve that, we need a European mental health strategy. This framework is important and necessary because it needs commitment from member states. We need to have more professionals, more resources, more investment. Because without more resources, prevention, treatment, investment, we can't treat mental health in a way that we should be able to. We can't provide the support and treatment that our citizens deserve. And so I would have liked to have seen this initiative come earlier, but let's implement it as soon as possible for the good of Europe and our citizens.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia vystúpi pani Dolores Montserrat. Prosím.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Ms.
Thank you.
La salud mental.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. We are seeing a silent increase in mental health problems, and we're seeing suicide rates going up in Europe and mental health deteriorating. Spain, we see suicide being the primary cause of death. That's when people say they wish to end their lives. It's not a cry. It's a cry for help. Situations that cause anxiety amongst young people, like bullying, but also the sudden change of habits, as we saw with COVID, can really throw a spanner in the works in terms of health. Now, the real problem we need to tackle is the stigma and believing that others will not believe you. We need general education for mental health matters across the board in education, healthcare, all sectors. We need to make sure that professionals are aware of mental health problems and that we make funding available for this and that we can provide the best form of therapy for patients. Let us call for a European mental health strategy because we must remember there cannot be health without mental health.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia vystúpi pani Véronique Trier-Lenoir. Prosím.
Thank you. And now Mrs. Véronique Trier-Lenoir, you have the floor. President of Council, Commissioner Stella, mental health, especially for young people, is a public health issue, and a major one, which was revealed and exacerbated by the crisis. This observation is shared in all European countries, and we mentioned it in the European Care Strategy. We need a collective awareness and coordinated preventive action and help for parents and the adaptation of our health systems and data sharing. Stella, we look indeed at health as an investment and mental health as a pillar of general health. Thank you for your initiative. But if this initiative is not based on robust governance and a system of appropriate financing, we will fail to put in place a genuine European health policy. Healthcare is a national prerogative, okay, but when an observation is so broadly shared, we need to have the courage to convince member states to step above these prerogatives as they've done in the past. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne a teraz vystúpi pán Tomáš Zdechovský.
Thank you, and now I give the floor to Mr. Tomáš Zdechovský.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner, Minister, ladies and gentlemen. On the 10th of October, we celebrated a Day of Mental Health, and I am grateful that this topic is finally debated by the European Parliament, and the European Commission has published its initiative. We need to realize that people do have mental health issues, especially after COVID pandemic, and to have a mental health issue is normal, and we need to be able to speak about these things, and it would be nice if the European Commission paid more attention to this issue. I would appreciate, Commissioner, if you also take action, and if it would be nice if you took part in a seminar that is organized by the Czech presidency very soon, and where we shall debate the latest trends in the area of mental health. And it would be nice if we all emphasized the mental health issue in our statements.
Ďalšia vystúpi pani Sára Chytedal. Prosím, máte.
And thank you. Mrs. Skyttedal has the floor.
1 in 4 will battle depression at some point in their life. And I'm one of the people that have done so. It's likely dozens of members of this chamber going through it right now. And politically, mental illness has been an area full of mistakes. Member states have limited what therapies public health services can provide. There's been politically motivated regulations prohibiting research on psychedelics, even though it has potential to treat patients that don't respond to traditional treatments. There are many restrictions on the legal possibility for families to get cared for loved ones that don't have the capacity to ask for help themselves. People are often left alone to tackle the darkness of their mind due to overregulating mental health. I'm convinced that we can learn from one another in Europe to do this better. It is clear that we need more flexible care and closer to patients and their needs. But some of you want to regulate more when you need to deregulate, centralize when we need to decentralize. Therefore, members of the left part of this parliament, I know that your instinct is to regulate every area that you care about, but I'm begging you, this time, back off.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne a ďalšia vystúpi v rozprave pani Cindy Fransen. Prosím, máte slovo.
Thank you, Mrs. Cindy Fransen.
Beste collega's. President, Madam Commissioner, on the 10th of October we had Mental Health Awareness Day, and we can only stress the figures that we are all aware of. The costs linked to mental health problems are about equivalent to 4% of GDP of EU member states. So that's 26 billion per year. And we've seen that from the study that young people suffering from mental health have doubled in number. So we need to do away with this taboo that still exists around mental health. I'm very pleased that Ms. von der Leyen, on her State of the Union address, made this announcement for 2023. Following on from the economic impacts of the pandemic, we suffered from all sorts of consequences, lack of people out of jobs, out of schools, and we've focused on protecting people from disease. But now it's really high time we look at the problem of mental health and try and act on that.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Teraz, kolegovia, pristúpime k procedúre Catch the Eye a ako prvý.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we now turn to Catch the Eye. The first speaker is Mr. Stelios Kimperopoulos. You have the floor.
Dear President, dear Commissioner Ms. Socio-economic, dear colleagues, mental health has been marginalized for a long time. COVID-19 pandemic brought the spotlight to the importance of the mental well-being. Young people, women, disabled persons, older people are at risk of being disproportionately impacted by mental ill health. They are also less likely to receive tailored mental health support. To that end, a human rights-based European strategy on mental health that addresses the socio-economic elements of mental health is imperative to achieve an equitable approach to mental health care. How will the European Commission ensure that different communities, including vulnerable groups, are centralized in this work? Moreover, decentralization is a key priority in reforming mental health systems. There is still a substantial number of persons with psychosocial impairments living in institutions across Europe and lacking community-based services. This new European initiative should boost the decentralization process towards the implementation of community-based care services. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia v rozprave vystúpi pani Sara Serdaš.
Thank you. Mrs. Serdash is next.
Thank you, President, colleagues. We know this is a cross-cutting issue that affects all sections of society, and we saw this so clearly during the COVID-19 pandemic. We see mental health is the second largest cause of death, and we saw the highest the levels of depression and anxiety doubling during these last few years. And this is a fundamental, crucial issue. We must shine a light on it, and we need to decide now whether we're going to act or leave citizens to struggle on their own. I am convinced that we need more legislative instruments to try and combat stigma and provide real solutions for mental health and really help reintegrate and support citizens in a way that's truly healthy and effective. Let's not forget this is affecting everybody, from the youngest to the older portions of our society. We need a European strategy for health. Let us turn the lights on, I say.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ako ďalšia vystupí pani Anna Miranda. Prosím, máte slovo.
Thank you. Mrs. Anna Miranda has the floor.
Muito obrigada, presidente. Señora, este debate.
Thank you. I really welcome this debate. My dad was suffering from bipolar disease, and my mother suffered from Alzheimer's, so it's close to my heart. So let me express my thanks for this debate. We're suffering from a lack of healthcare experts. We don't have enough people trained to support young people. We've got more than 3,000 people in Galicia on waiting lists trying to get treatment. And just last year, over 300 suicide cases occurred. We have a problem of stigmatization, discrimination, stereotyping, and material and staffing shortages, which are really having a negative impact on health, mental health. So we need to really strengthen and reinforce public health care everywhere, but also in my own country.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne a teraz vystúpi pán Mick Wallace. Prosím, máte slovo.
Thank you. Mr. Mick Wallace.
Access to mental health care is a human right, and it's linked to the fact that poverty is a violation of human rights. The right to timely access to affordable, preventive and curative health care of good quality is enshrined in UN and EU conventions. Yet in Ireland, more than 4,200 children are on the waiting list for the Children and Adolescent Mental Health Service. More than 520 children are waiting for over a year. Ireland spends 6% of its health budget on mental health, less than half than a lot of the countries in Europe. Commissioner, I realise that health remains a member state competency, but in Ireland we have a medicalised mental health model that's a disaster. Can the EU pressure Ireland to invest seriously in public health talk therapy? After all, the EU were able to pressure us into bailing out failed, useless banks, which actually has had a huge impact on mental health in Ireland.
Ďalší vystupí pán Anthony Comini Oliveres. Prosím, máte slovo.
The next speaker is Mr. Oliveres.
Thanks, President. Ci sono due sfide principali per le nostre politiche di salute mentale.
There are two main challenges for our mental health policy. First of all, we need to be fully aware of social determinants. Indicators over the last few years have all shown that the economic crisis has been devastating, both in 2008 and the COVID crisis, and their impact on mental health has been immense. Whether the pathologies are acute or non-acute, that doesn't make any difference. It's extremely serious, not just for adults, but for young people and kids. But these aren't distributed equally. Younger people is where there are, from poor families, are suffering disproportionately. It's the weakest link, if you like, in the family. And this is where our mental health care should be focused. We need to work on our mental health system, have a community paradigm. That means generate diversity and make alternative therapies available for people so that people with mental problems can have a developed life without separating themselves from the community, while those people who are part of the new assistance system also receive help and also have the cultural changes we need so that everyone knows how to live alongside people with mental health problems in our everyday lives so that they are citizens like us and they have the same right to happiness that we do. Thank you, President.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia vystúpi pani Sunčana Glavak. Prosím, máte slovo.
Hvala lijepo predsjedavajući. Diljem Europe prema podacima Svjetske zdravstvene organizacije 110 milijuna ljudi živi s mentalnim poremećajem koji rezultiraju s gotovo 250.000 smrti godišnje. Ovo su strašne.
110 million people currently live with mental stress. Our citizens are exposed not only to the inflation and threats of nuclear war and climate changes, and among the youth, cyberbullying and peer violence. We have to understand that all this is built upon a certain socio-economic basis. Mental health and mental problems are a continuous process, and we need an integrated approach to this process. I believe that the psychiatric care in the community is the best way forward. The Republic of Croatia has already made certain steps in that direction. We have to have a society in which a conversation and therapy with a psychologist or a psychiatrist is something normal and acceptable. We need to give help to those who need it. Thank you.
Ďalší v rozprave vystúpi.
Thank you very much. Next up, we'll have Josef Olakas. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished Commissioner. I indeed want to thank you for the report and all the attention paid to the mental health. By profession, I am a medical doctor, and the environment determines to a large extent not only mental health, but also physical health. War and pandemic has demonstrated that we do not pay sufficient attention to the mental health issues. So therefore, I would advocate taking a pan-European decision which would help such patients to integrate better into the society. The environment that we live in should be also adapted to people suffering from mental health issues. This would help them to integrate better in our common efforts, and they would feel really good citizens of the European Union.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne.
Thank you very much. Next up, Luc McFlanagan. Please take the floor.
Up until recently, we didn't talk about mental health and we didn't do anything for people with mental health. That's changed now. Now we talk an awful lot about mental health, but we don't do anything for people with mental health. We just talk about it. And now politicians have copped on that this is a popular thing to talk about and to pretend to do something about it. Because what I'm hearing today is a lot of rich people telling poor people maybe they should do a bit of yoga and think about wellness, when in fact their mental health is far more impacted by the fact that they don't have a house, they can't afford to rent a house, and they have no hope of ever buying a house. There are families with children living in tents, and we're talking about mental health. Sort out the basic quality of life for people. Like if you'd done it for my mother, her mental health would have been a lot better. But all you do is talk about it. You're not serious about it. This is pure fluff and bullshit.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. I would also like to remind colleagues to mind the language and out of respect for everyone here and for our colleagues. Ďalšia v rozprave vystúpi.
Next up, we'll have Madame Grappini. You have the floor.
Domnule președinte, doamna comisar, sănătatea, toți spunem că este prioritate. Sănătatea mentală, de asemenea.
We all say that mental health is a priority. Madam Commissioner, you said that during the pandemic there was a rise in the number of cases of such illnesses, and that probably because you took measures that were not justified. Even the OMS said that. Who is responsible for these new cases? People are now stressed by the costs of energy, the costs of life. Again, we are going to face an increase in these cases. You cannot just wash your hands and say health is of national competence. But you took measures in this field during the pandemic. So we don't have to just talk about health. We need to come up with actions, with concrete measures. I ask you now, do we have concrete measures in order to solve the problems of the cost of invoices? Do we have unitary measures at the level of the EU in connection to mental health? Because these people are being marginalized. These people and their families cannot afford a proper care. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the European Commission, we will have Madam Commissioner Stella Kyriakides. Please take the floor.
President, honourable members, on the 10th of October, we celebrated Mental Health Day. And that is why today I'm wearing a green ribbon, to raise awareness and to make sure that we don't forget about mental health. Now, I want to thank you for the many important interventions I heard today. MEP Walsh spoke about the need for us to be the voices and the need for us to finally do something about it now. And I think that the fact that we are having this discussion is exactly that. We need to be the voices. MEP Van Sparentek spoke about the LGBTQI community, struggling with mental health issues, online violence, hate speech, bullying. We can and need to do so much more. I heard MEP Kopczynska and MEP Kimperopoulos. Community models. That's exactly where we need to be heading. It's crucial. We need to make mental health services community services. We need to reach out to the citizens, to find the vulnerable and support them, to work towards prevention. We heard various colleagues speak about stigma. People are embarrassed to speak about mental health issues, and I want to highlight MEP Miranda and MEP Skitterdell and thank them for sharing. Because the more people speak out about mental health issues, the more we are able to highlight this, the more we are able to prioritize and do something about it. The darkness of the mind is something we need to overcome and bring light to it, and thank you for sharing light. MEP Copat spoke about the elderly, and MEP Montserrat spoke about the suicide risk, and MEP Véronique Triel-Lenoir spoke about the need to actually move forward with this. And I want to tell you that we will be coming forward with initiatives this summer. So a great deal has been said. I don't think I need to repeat it, but I cannot ignore what MEP Flanagan has also said. He said, we're all about talk and we're not doing anything about it. I have been doing something about it and working in this area all my working life. And I believe the MEPs in this room and many who are not in this room but have put their voices across today are doing this because we are doing something about it. And as a Commission, we're coming forward with an initiative this very summer. So let us all work together. We need to be on board together with this. We need to have strong cooperation and collaboration with everyone. We need to deliver mental health in an all-policies approach. And the European Parliament will and can play a key role in this initiative. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne, pani komisár.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. And to conclude the debate, on behalf of the Council, we have the Vice Premier, Mr. BARTOŠ. You have the floor.
Mr. President, honourable members, dear Commissioner, thank you very much for your views. Our discussion confirmed that mental health is an issue which cannot be ignored. The Presidency of the Council is determined to contribute to the necessary cooperation in the area of public health and stand ready to facilitate discussion and cooperation. As a matter of example, we are organising the conference under the auspices of the Czech Presidency on 14th of November in Brussels, which focuses on resilient mental health in the European Union. And we are, of course, ready to examine relevant proposals from the European Commission in this regard. Although the urgency of COVID-19 crisis is over for the time, other crises seriously impacting on the mental resilience of our population, and those are ongoing. Therefore, public health, including mental health, should remain a political priority for all the reasons that we outline here and you outline here today. And of course, there are many areas that are directly influencing the, let's say, mental resistance of a society. It's a fear of the future. So a lot of delivery is done on the other areas that are going to the prevention of such situation. But of course, when we talked well-being historically and mental health, it's something that goes across the politics. That's why so many discussions on the other topics also include that topic as relevant to the solution. Thank you very much for your attention today.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne.
Thank you very much. We have now concluded the debate and we'll suspend the sitting for a few minutes. We'll continue at 12 o'clock. We'll have the voting. Thank you.